I never thought I'd be left out in the cold by my own daughter. I never imagined the man she married would strip me of my dignity in my lowest moment, and that she would let him. But what they didn't know was that life had one last card for me to play. And when I played it, everything changed. Get ready, because what you're about to hear is not just a story, it's a reckoning. Comment below where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more stories like this. My name is Margaret. I'm 58 years old, and until not long ago, I believed in something called unconditional love, especially when it came to family. I built my life around my husband and our daughter Amanda. Every meal I cooked, every holiday I planned, every dollar I saved was for them. When my husband passed from cancer last year, it felt like the floor vanished beneath me. But I told myself I still had Amanda. I still had my daughter. I sold the house my husband and I had built from scratch in Cedar Park, just north of Austin. Too many memories, too many nights waking up expecting to hear his voice calling from the kitchen. Amanda and her husband, Chad, offered me a place to stay for a while, or at least Amanda did. Chad barely looked up from his phone when I moved in. I tried not to make waves. I kept to my small room in the back. I cooked, cleaned, offered to run errands, trying to be helpful, trying to stay out of the way. But Chad had a way of making me feel unwanted. His eyes always carried this irritation, like I was a splinter under his skin. It started with the small things. He'd roll his eyes if I asked a question. He'd change the TV when I was mid-show. Once, I heard him mutter under his breath, "Freeloader," as he passed by me in the hall. I tried to convince myself I misheard, but deep down, I knew I hadn't. Amanda? She said nothing. I'd look to her for backup, for a word, anything, but she always played it down. He's stressed, she'd say. Work's been rough. I swallowed the shame and stayed quiet. That's what mothers do, right? But that night, that one night, it shattered me. We were at the dinner table. I had made chicken pot pie, his favorite. Amanda was scrolling on her phone, Chad sipping beer like he always did. The silence was heavy. Then, out of nowhere, Chad looked up and said, "You know, maybe it's time we stop pretending this is temporary. We're not a charity." Amanda froze. I stared at him. "What do you mean?" He smirked. "I mean, how long is this supposed to go on? You're not working. You're not contributing. We've got bills. We didn't sign up for extra mouths to feed." My breath caught. My heart was pounding. I turned to Amanda, desperate. "Amanda?" She wouldn't meet my eyes. "Maybe it's best," she mumbled, "if you find something more stable. For everyone's sake. Everyone's sake." I didn't scream. I didn't argue. I stood up, walked to my room, packed my things. 2 suitcases. That's all I had left of my life. I didn't even cry while I packed. The tears came later, when I stood outside their building, the wind biting through my coat, and realized I had nowhere to go. Amanda didn't walk me out. Chad didn't even bother pretending. I sat on the curb for an hour. My phone battery was dead. My heart was too. I remember thinking, this is what it feels like to be erased. That night, I checked into a motel, the kind where the wallpaper peels and the vending machine eats your change. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering how everything could turn so cold, wondering what I had done to deserve this kind of abandonment. The next morning, I sent Amanda a message. "I understand. I love you. Always." No reply. The next week, I sent another, then another. Birthdays, little updates, silence. 3 months passed. Each day felt longer than the last. I tried applying for jobs, anything. But no one wanted to hire a grieving widow in her late 50s with no recent work history. I considered cleaning houses, babysitting, but my body didn't move the way it used to. The loneliness, it was suffocating. And worse than that, the shame. I had given everything to that girl. How could she turn her back so easily? One evening, as I was going through a box of old family keepsakes, trying to feel close to something, anything, I found it. My mother's old diary. I hadn't read it in years, maybe never, but something pulled me to it. I sat on the edge of the motel bed, turned the pages, and that's when I found it. A name, a truth, a secret that changed everything. I remember the moment clearly. My hands shook, my heart raced, because suddenly I wasn't just the mother who got kicked out. I was someone else entirely, and for the first time in months, I smiled. They took everything from me, but they had no idea what was coming. After that night, the days blurred into each other like gray watercolors bleeding on a wet canvas. The motel room smelled of stale air and distant cigarettes. The buzzing hum of the vending machine outside my door became a lullaby of defeat. I stayed quiet. I didn't cry every night, but when I did, it was quiet. The kind of crying where your whole body trembles, but you keep it inside because no one's coming to comfort you. I texted Amanda again on the 4th day. A simple message. I'm okay. Just wanted to know how you are. No reply. I tried again 2 weeks later. Just a heart emoji. Nothing. I told myself she was busy, that she'd come around, that Chad must be twisting things. But as the weeks rolled on, that hope started to rot inside me. My money was thinning. I tried getting part-time work, grocery stores, front desks, even a diner down by the highway, but I was either overqualified or not a good fit, which is just polite code for too old and too tired. One night, I sat on the floor of that room, sorting through the only box I had brought with me that wasn't clothes. It was a dusty memory box from the house, some old photos, a few letters, and tucked at the very bottom, a small, leather-bound book. My mother's diary. It surprised me. I don't remember packing it. I almost put it back, but something about the way the leather felt in my hands made me pause. I lit the old lamp on the side table and opened the first page. Her handwriting hadn't changed from the notes she used to slip into my lunchbox as a kid. Looped, neat, always in ink. At first, it was ordinary stuff. Weather, church, complaints about grocery prices. But then I got to the entry dated June. He came again today, said he wished things were different, that he wished I could be his wife, but he has a family, a business, a name to protect. Margaret will never know. She must never know. I just pray one day she understands how much I loved her, even if she was born out of mistake and desire. I read it twice. Then again, she must never know. My breath caught in my chest. I flipped further, entry after entry, hints, memories, meetings at hotels, small cash payments she tried to refuse but needed desperately. She never named him in full, only initials, HJS. But then, another entry. February. He said he'd made arrangements, that if anything ever happened to him, he'd ensure Margaret had something, a part of what he built. It won't be official, of course. It's too dangerous. But he promised me. A trust, a letter. He said his lawyer, Mr. Goldstein, would know. That name, it hit me like a punch to the stomach. Goldstein. I'd seen it before. It took me 2 days and several online searches from the motel's shared computer, but I found him. Leonard Goldstein, retired estate lawyer, still listed under a private firm in Dallas. I didn't call. I couldn't. My hands trembled too much. Instead, I sent a letter. A real, handwritten letter explaining who I was, who my mother was, and asking, begging, for a conversation. 2 weeks later, I received a call. I remember the way his voice cracked when I mentioned my mother's name. He knew her, not just professionally, personally. I always wondered if you'd reach out someday, he said. There's something you need to see. I took a Greyhound to Dallas the next morning. My suitcase was half packed, just in case he turned out to be some scam artist. But when I walked into that quiet office, filled with old books and even older silence, I knew it was real. He handed me a sealed envelope. Yellowed, fragile. It was from Harold James Sterling, the founder of Sterling Energy, one of the biggest oil firms in Central Texas. A man I'd seen in newspaper clippings all my life. A man with a family, a reputation, a legacy. The letter was addressed to my daughter, Margaret Louise. I couldn't read the whole thing in one go. I cried before the second paragraph. He admitted everything, the affair, the regret, the silent love, and then the promise. In the event of my death, I have insured a portion of my personal assets, untraceable through my estate, are to be delivered to you via Mr. Goldstein. You are my blood. And though I was too much a coward to claim you in life, I claim you now in death. Mr. Goldstein slid a folder across the table. Inside, bank accounts, a modest investment portfolio, ownership papers, titles. The total value? A little over $1 million. I stared at the papers, then at him. This is real? I whispered. He nodded. It's yours. Always was. My heart thundered. Not because of the money, but because for the first time in my life, I felt chosen, seen. I didn't scream or laugh or break down. I just sat there, quiet as a whisper, letting the truth wash over me like a long-awaited rain. That night in my motel room, I didn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling like I had for months, but this time, with a smile creeping onto my face. They thought they discarded me. They thought I was done, but they had no idea. I wasn't broken. I was just getting started. I didn't go back to Austin right away. Something inside me had shifted, permanently. I wasn't just Margaret, the forgotten mother. I was someone new now. Someone who had been lied to her entire life and finally saw the truth. For the first time in months, maybe years, I wasn't drowning in shame. I was breathing in clarity. I stayed in Dallas for a few more days, just walking through neighborhoods, sipping coffee in silence, watching people live their lives. People who hadn't been tossed aside like I had. And for the first time, I didn't envy them. I studied them. I wondered who among them wore smiles that masked heartache, who had been betrayed, who had clawed their way back from being invisible. Leonard Goldstein didn't just give me the inheritance. He gave me time. Time to process. Time to understand what I now held in my hands. It wasn't just wealth. It was power. And I had no idea what to do with it. But grief has a way of becoming fuel when you've been humiliated enough. When I returned to Austin, I didn't go back to the motel. I booked a short-term rental downtown, just off South Congress. Clean, modern, quiet. The kind of place Amanda and Chad would never imagine me affording. I began dressing differently, more polished, more deliberate. Not flashy, just invisible in a new way. The kind of invisible that gets you through doors. I started watching YouTube videos on investing, real estate, contracts. I learned the language of business, not because I wanted to build an empire, but because I wanted to protect myself. I would never be powerless again. That's when I found it. The listing was buried on a real estate auction site, a unit apartment building in East Austin. A little run down, but structurally sound. The location? The exact complex where Amanda and Chad lived. I sat there, staring at the screen, heart pounding. It was listed as distressed, with the owner defaulting on property taxes. Auction scheduled in 2 weeks. I didn't hesitate. With Mr. Goldstein's help, I created an LLC, an anonymous shell company. I filed the paperwork, transferred the funds, and placed the bid. I wasn't planning revenge. Not exactly. But I was going to take control of the one place they thought they ruled. The auction came and went. I won. Quietly. Legally. Entirely under the radar. And just like that, I owned the building where they lived. Where they kicked me out with 2 suitcases and a hollow excuse. Where they humiliated me in my lowest moment. I remember sitting at my desk, looking at the deed, and whispering aloud, "Let's see how Chad likes paying rent," to a mouth he couldn't feed. A month later, the notification letters were sent out to all tenants. Rents would be reassessed, lease terms reviewed, and for Chad and Amanda, the new amount was triple, not double, triple. Market value plus overdue fees. He must have exploded. I didn't need to see it to know. I could feel the rage from miles away. But it wasn't about money. It was about pride. Chad was a man who needed to feel in control, and I had just pulled the rug out from under him, silently. Amanda tried to call me 2 days after the notice. It was the first time she reached out since the night I left. I let it go to voicemail. "Mom, I don't know if you heard, but something weird's going on. Our rent just shot up, like, a lot. Chad's losing it. I don't know. Can we talk?" I didn't respond. This wasn't about vengeance. This was about gravity. They needed to feel the weight of their choices. I drove by the building once, late at night. Their lights were on. I could see shadows moving behind the curtains. Amanda pacing. Chad yelling, his silhouette unmistakable. I watched them for a minute, then drove away. Part of me felt hollow. Part of me felt vindicated. And part of me still hurt like hell. Because even now, knowing what I knew, holding what I held, I would have given anything to be invited back in. Not to the apartment, but to my daughter's heart. But I knew that wasn't possible. At least not yet. So I stayed silent. And I waited. Because sometimes, the loudest justice is the one that doesn't say a word. And I wasn't finished yet. I didn't realize how much I had changed until I saw Amanda at the grocery store 3 weeks after the rent increase. She didn't see me. I was 2 aisles over, hidden behind a rack of discounted cereal. She looked tired. Not just tired. Worn down. Her hair was tied back sloppily, the way she used to do when she'd been crying. Her cart was half empty, mostly cheap staples, rice, eggs, a few off-brand cans. I should have walked away. I didn't. I followed her through the store at a distance, heart pounding like I was doing something wrong. She paused in front of a small box of mac and cheese, then looked down at her phone. A text from Chad, maybe. Her shoulders sank. She put the box back. That moment broke me. Not because I pitied her, but because I remembered the little girl who used to run to me crying when she scraped her knee. The one who asked me every night to check for monsters under her bed. And now, she was living with one. I drove home that day and sat on the couch in silence for hours. I stared at the window, thinking about how life had twisted us into strangers. But I reminded myself, this wasn't punishment. This was consequence. And consequence was long overdue. I had plans now. Not just the building, but a quiet, slow chess match. Every move calculated, every step thoughtful. With the LLC fully in place and the property legally transferred, I started repairs. Small ones at first. Leaks, broken locks, flickering lights. Chad never noticed. He was too distracted by the rent increase, yelling at the property manager by email, demanding answers. But I knew him, knew how his ego worked. He wasn't going to move. He'd see that as defeat. And Amanda? She'd follow his lead, as she always did. So I kept going. I changed the property signage, had a security camera installed near the lobby, updated the tenants' mailboxes, all under the name of my company, ML Holdings, short for Margaret Louise. No one knew who was behind it. Then came the notice, annual inspections, mandatory. Chad sent a furious response through the tenant portal, filled with empty threats and self-righteous indignation. I smiled reading it. He was unraveling, and I didn't need to lift a finger. Meanwhile, I was becoming someone I barely recognized. I wore my hair differently now, sharper clothes. I walked with purpose. I started joining small business meetups under a pseudonym, learning the ropes of real estate, building connections. No one asked about my past. They only saw a quiet, composed woman with sharp eyes and cash on hand. The best disguise is the truth you don't say. One morning, I passed Amanda and Chad in the parking lot as I exited a tenant meeting. I kept my sunglasses on, hair tucked into a sleek bun, documents in hand. Amanda barely glanced at me. Chad didn't recognize me at all. Later that night, I sat in my living room, sipping tea, thinking about how strange it felt to walk right past your own child and be invisible. Not because you're weak, but because you're stronger than they remember. They couldn't see me now because they only knew the version of me they used to control. And that woman was gone. The calls from Amanda continued. Soft, hesitant voicemails. Hi, Mom. Just wanted to see if maybe you had time to talk. I know things have been complicated. I didn't return them. Not out of cruelty, but because I needed her to feel the void she created. And every time I felt doubt creep in, I opened my mother's diary. I read those words over and over again. Margaret will never know. She must never know. But I did know now, and with that knowledge came a kind of armor no one could tear through. I was no longer the woman begging to stay under their roof. I was the woman who owned it. I always believed revenge wasn't about getting even. It was about balance. Justice without fire, a correction, not a war. But when I saw the email response from Chad after he received the notice of his rent increase, I'll admit, a small flicker of satisfaction lit inside me. Subject, rent increase? This is absolutely unacceptable. This must be a mistake. Tripling our rent? That's extortion. I demand to speak to whoever owns this dump. We've lived here for 3 years and never been late once. This is robbery. He signed it, Chad D. Harmon, like his name meant something. I read the email 3 times and then forwarded it to my property manager with a simple note. Please respond using standard clause C regarding market rate adjustments. No special exceptions. Chad wasn't just angry. He was stunned. His arrogance never made room for the idea that someone could outmaneuver him. He'd become so used to being in control that the idea of answering to a faceless landlord drove him mad. Amanda tried calling me again that same night. The voicemail was different. No pretense. Mom, I know you're not picking up, but I really need to talk to you. Things are rough right now. Chad's upset. He's taking it out on everything. We're trying to figure things out. I miss you. I do. Her voice cracked at the end. For a moment, my fingers hovered over the screen. I could call her back, tell her it would be okay, that I'd fix everything, but I didn't. Because it wasn't okay, and I couldn't keep fixing the messes she helped make. Amanda had let him throw me out like I was nothing more than a bill they couldn't afford. And now that the pressure was on her, she remembered how to dial my number? No, let her sit with the silence a little longer. The next week, I authorized additional upgrades on the property. New exterior paint, hallway lighting, landscaping improvements. Chad's rent wasn't just a punishment. It was funding improvements for the other tenants. That was the irony. Everyone else benefited. He just couldn't see it. He began leaving angry notes under the office door. The water pressure sucks. Trash is piling up. If this is what we're paying for, it's a joke. Every note went unanswered. Amanda stopped leaving messages. She started texting instead. Short ones. Hey, can we talk? I really need you. Then silence again. Meanwhile, I watched the bank statements roll in. ML Holdings was stable, profitable even. The other tenants were quiet, respectful, and paid on time. It was only Chad making noise, and Amanda caught in his storm. But things changed when I received the quarterly report from the building manager. Attached were photos of Chad and Amanda's unit. The bathroom had mildew, kitchen tiles cracked, mail stacking up on the floor. They were cutting corners, living lean. I should have felt pity. Instead, I felt clarity. This wasn't just about rent. It was about power. And Chad was losing it fast. Word around the building was he'd started taking on extra hours at work. Amanda was seen crying on the back steps one afternoon by another tenant. They were unraveling from the inside out, and I didn't have to say a single word. That was the part I kept coming back to. For so long, I was the one begging to be heard, begging Amanda to see what Chad was, to see what she was becoming by standing beside him. Now, they were choking on their own silence, and I was watching from above, literally. My new apartment overlooked their courtyard, different building, higher floor, safer neighborhood, a view they could never afford. I didn't watch them all the time, just enough to remember that I wasn't crazy, that I hadn't imagined the betrayal, that what they did to me deserved consequences. And yet, despite all that, some nights I still found myself sitting by the window, holding my phone, staring at Amanda's last message. I really need you. The woman inside me, the mother, ached. But the woman I had become? She knew this was only the beginning. I always thought heartbreak came in loud moments, slamming doors, shouted words, public scenes. But the real heartbreak? It's quiet. It comes in the form of a voicemail you don't return, a message left unread, the silence between you and someone who once called you Mommy. The calls from Amanda stopped, the texts slowed, but the damage on her end only seemed to grow. From what I gathered through the building staff, the tension in their apartment had turned into open hostility. Chad was snipping at everyone, refusing maintenance requests, and demanding unnecessary inspections, looking for someone to blame. Amanda, I was told, looked like she hadn't slept in days. I didn't rejoice. I didn't celebrate. This wasn't about watching them suffer. It was about something far more painful. Watching the daughter I raised willingly stay in a cage and call it love. One afternoon, my property manager sent over a report after a noise complaint. The neighbor downstairs had heard a heated argument, shouting, something about losing control and, "This is all your fault." Chad had stormed out and didn't come back until the next morning. Amanda stayed locked inside the apartment the whole night, lights off, curtains closed. I waited, not for Chad, for her. It took 2 more days, 2 long, aching days. Then, just as the sun was dipping behind the trees one evening, my building's intercom buzzed. "Hi, this is Amanda Harmon. I was wondering if my mom lives here?" My heart stopped. I didn't answer right away. I just watched the screen, frozen. Then slowly, I pressed the door release. 10 minutes later, a soft knock echoed at my apartment door. When I opened it, she stood there looking like a shadow of the girl I raised, pale, makeup smudged, wrinkles in her shirt. She looked 20 years older than she was. We stared at each other for a long time. Neither of us spoke. Finally, she let out a breath. "Hi, Mom." I stepped aside. She walked in slowly, like she wasn't sure she was allowed to. The room was silent except for the clink of teacups as I prepared 2 mugs. I didn't ask why she was there. I didn't ask how she was. I just handed her the tea, sat down across from her, and waited. "I don't know where to start," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I said nothing. She looked down. He's not easy. He's angry all the time. Blames the rent. Blames me. Blames the dog next door, for God's sake. Still, I stayed silent. I thought I was doing the right thing. Back then, when we asked you to leave, asked, as if I had a choice. I just wanted to keep the peace. I didn't want more conflict. Chad said, she paused. He said you'd never leave unless we pushed you. And God, I hate myself for agreeing. I took a sip of tea. I miss you, she whispered. But I don't know how to fix it. I studied her face. Every line, every flinch. She was looking for forgiveness, but afraid to ask for it. So I gave her the only thing I could. Silence. Because sometimes silence is safer than the truth. We sat like that for nearly an hour. She didn't ask for money. She didn't ask for help. She just wanted to be near me. And I let her. When she finally stood to leave, she reached for my hand. I'm sorry, she said, for everything. I didn't say it back. I just held her hand a little longer than she expected. She pulled away first, and then, with tears welling up in her eyes, she walked out the door. I didn't cry. But the second the door clicked shut, I sank into my chair, holding the warmth of her teacup in my palms like a lifeline. She had come. She had looked me in the eye. And now I knew. The cracks were finally starting to show. The thing about power, real power, is that you never have to raise your voice to use it. You don't slam doors or shout threats. You just pull a string here, close a door there, and watch the ones who underestimated you start to squirm. And Chad? He was squirming. After Amanda's visit, things grew darker in that apartment. I didn't need a camera to know it. You can feel a house unraveling if you listen closely enough. The maintenance team told me Chad had become unhinged, storming down to the management office twice a week, demanding to know who owned the building. He wanted names. He wanted a face. He wanted someone to blame. The fact that he didn't have one? That made him spiral. He started digging. I knew he would. Chad wasn't the type to accept defeat quietly. I'd seen the way he used to search Amanda's phone when she took too long at the store, the way he checked her receipts, commented on how long she took to run errands. Possessive didn't even begin to cover it. So when he started poking around for the name behind ML Holdings, I was ready. He started by trying to look up the LLC, standard, but my lawyer had filed everything through a privacy trust. No names, no leads. Then came the phishing emails to my property manager. Pretend to be a tenant. Ask who owns the building. Sloppy. Desperate. He even called the title office, pretending to be a lawyer representing another property. The clerk flagged it and reported it straight to us. And when those routes failed, he turned inward. Amanda. I don't know what happened exactly, but one of the neighbors called the management office and asked if someone could check on the Harmons. She said she heard glass breaking. Raised voices, the kind of anger that doesn't just come from bills, it comes from fear. The maintenance man went up there. No one answered, but through the door, he could hear Chad pacing, muttering, Amanda crying. The silence afterward was heavier than the yelling. A few days later, I received a strange envelope. No name on the outside, no return address. Inside, a note. I know what you're doing. You think you're clever, but you don't scare me. I'll find out who you are, and when I do, you'll regret it. No signature, but I recognized the handwriting. Chad wrote like he spoke, angry, uneven, pressing too hard on the paper. I sat there with the letter in my hands, heart thudding, not out of fear, out of memory, because it took me back to the moment he stood in that kitchen and looked me in the eye like I was dirt beneath his feet, the way Amanda stood beside him, not just silent, but complicit. And now, he was the one grasping at shadows, choking on uncertainty, screaming into the void. It was poetic, but it was also dangerous. So I doubled down. I had my lawyer contact building security. We installed more surveillance, discreet, legal, routine. I made sure the other tenants were protected. The building wasn't going to fall apart because one man couldn't handle the weight of his own cruelty. And Amanda? She didn't call again. But I heard from the building manager that she'd been walking to work. Her car had been sold. Their utilities were being cut back. Lights off by PM. No heat some nights. The cracks weren't just in their relationship. They were in their survival. And yet, through it all, I kept my distance. Because this wasn't about revenge. It was about resolution. Letting Chad's world shrink until he realized how small he really was. And letting Amanda decide, Would she stay in the cage, or find the key I'd placed right in front of her? I knew she wasn't ready yet, but the walls were closing in, and secrets have a way of leaking through cracks. I didn't expect the knock on my door that night. It had been quiet for days. No emails from management, no voicemails from Amanda, no more anonymous threats. Just silence, the kind that feels like a storm crouched in the distance waiting. But when the knock came, soft and slow, something in my chest tightened. I opened the door. Amanda stood there, soaked from the rain, a grocery bag clutched to her chest like it was the only thing keeping her upright. Her eyes were red and her mouth opened, but nothing came out. She looked like she had run out of words days ago. I stepped aside. She walked in slowly, dripping water on the hardwood floor. I handed her a towel, and we moved without speaking. I warmed the kettle, poured 2 mugs of chamomile tea. She sat on the edge of the couch like she didn't want to stay long, like she didn't deserve to, and maybe she didn't. She stared into her cup, eyes hollow. "He's not who I thought he was," she said finally. I stayed quiet. I knew. Part of me always knew, but I told myself it was stress, that he just needed support, that if I was patient, he'd come around. Still, I said nothing. She looked up, her voice trembling. "He thinks someone's targeting us. He's obsessed. He's been going through my phone, my emails. Last week, he followed me to work, said he was making sure I wasn't involved." A shiver ran through her, and not from the cold. "He asked if I was hiding something. If you were hiding something." That caught my breath. She didn't wait for an answer. "I told him I hadn't spoken to you in weeks, that I didn't even know where you were." She paused, but that was a lie. I met her eyes for the first time. "I found your building listed in a security notice. Same management company. I figured it out. It wasn't hard." Of course it wasn't. Amanda was smart, always had been. But smart doesn't always mean brave. And now she looked like someone who had finally opened her eyes and hated what she saw. I didn't speak. Not yet. "I miss you," she whispered, "but I don't even know how to be around you anymore." My hand tightened around the mug. "You left," she said, voice cracking, "and I let you. I let him push you out." Finally, I spoke. "No, Amanda, you didn't let him. You stood with him." That stopped her cold. She blinked. Her lips parted slightly, like she wanted to deny it, to defend herself. But there was nothing left to defend. I stood up, walked to the window, stared out into the night. "I begged for your voice that night," I said. "Just one word, just one, and you stayed silent." Behind me, I heard her exhale, a quiet, broken sound. "I didn't think it would get this bad," she said. "I thought I could manage him." "You can't manage a man like that," I said softly. "You survive him, or you leave him." She didn't respond. She didn't have to. We sat in silence for a long time. 2 women who shared blood but not trust. Not yet. Maybe never. When she finally stood to leave, she set the mug down carefully, her eyes rimmed with unshed tears. "I don't expect forgiveness," she said. "I just needed to remember what it felt like to be safe." I walked her to the door. She paused, then turned back suddenly and wrapped her arms around me. I didn't return the hug at first, then I did, but gently, cautiously, like someone trying to hold a memory without letting it slip through their fingers. When she pulled back, she didn't say goodbye. She just looked at me one last time and left. And as the door closed behind her, I felt something shift deep in my chest. Not forgiveness, not yet, but the faintest flicker of something that might one day grow into it, if she let it. The invitation went out on a Tuesday morning, quietly, professionally, without fanfare. A tenants' meeting to discuss upcoming building renovations, scheduled in the common room the following week. Mandatory attendance, questions welcome. I knew Chad would be there. I knew he wouldn't be able to resist. He wanted a name, a face, someone to point a finger at. He had no idea he'd be walking right into the hands of the woman he discarded like a broken appliance. The day of the meeting, I arrived early. I wore a charcoal gray blazer and dark jeans. Simple, elegant, unrecognizable. My hair, now in soft waves, brushed my shoulders. I looked nothing like the woman who once begged for a sliver of dignity at Amanda's kitchen table. The common room filled slowly. Tenants trickled in, some curious, others annoyed, most indifferent. And then came Chad. He stormed in with the swagger of a man expecting confrontation, Amanda trailing behind him like a shadow. He didn't look around, didn't notice me. He only saw the property manager at the front and went straight to him. "Where is she?" he demanded. "I want to speak to the person in charge, today." The manager remained calm. "All questions will be addressed during the presentation." Chad scoffed. Amanda looked down at her shoes. I sat near the back, silent. The presentation began. Routine announcements, upgrades, timelines. The new security system, the updated landscaping, the improved insulation, practical changes, smart decisions. All funded in part by the very rent Chad had so bitterly protested. Then the manager paused. "We'd like to thank ML Holdings for their commitment to revitalizing the property and prioritizing tenant comfort. The owner is here today should anyone have questions." I stood up. The room turned. I walked slowly toward the front, calm, steady. Every step a quiet drumbeat in my chest. Chad's face twisted in confusion, then disbelief. Amanda's mouth parted in shock. I turned to the room. "Good evening," I said. "My name is Margaret. I'm the owner of this building." You could hear a pin drop. Chad stood up so fast his chair scraped the floor. "You? This is a joke. What kind of game is this?" I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw the cracks he had tried to hide, the sweat behind his collar, the puffiness under his eyes, the panic. "No game," I said softly. "Just business." He took a step forward. "You manipulated this. You've been behind this the whole time. You raised our rent. You're trying to ruin us." I held my ground. "I gave you a roof. I made improvements. I treated every tenant equally. What I didn't do was forget." He opened his mouth to speak, but I turned back to the group. "If anyone has questions about the changes or improvements, I'm happy to answer them after the meeting. Thank you." I stepped aside. The meeting resumed, but the tension never left the air. Chad didn't sit down. He just stood there, trembling, furious. Amanda sat with her hands clasped tightly in her lap, eyes wide and wet. When the meeting ended, tenants came to me, shaking hands, asking questions, thanking me. Some had suspected. Most had no idea. Chad waited until the room emptied. Then he marched toward me. "You think you've won," he hissed. "But this is nothing. You've made an enemy." I stared at him, eyes level. "No, Chad. I didn't make anything. You did. The day you looked me in the eye and treated me like I didn't matter." Amanda stepped between us. "Chad, stop." He turned to her, shocked. "What did you just—" "I said stop," she repeated louder this time. "She's not your enemy. She never was." "You are?" He looked at her like she'd struck him, and in a way, she had. Amanda turned to me, her voice trembling. "I didn't know, I swear, about the building, the money, any of it." I nodded. "I know. Why didn't you tell me?" "Because you had to see it, not just hear it." She blinked back tears. Chad scoffed, stepping back. "You two deserve each other." "No," I said quietly. "She deserves better." Then I turned and walked away, and for the first time since that awful night in their kitchen, I felt something shift inside me. Not revenge, not satisfaction, but power, quiet, firm, and entirely mine. Amanda showed up at my door again 4 days later, this time holding something in her hands that made my knees buckle the second I saw it. A book, faded leather, corner torn, the spine barely holding. My mother's diary. I opened the door without a word. She stepped in, eyes wide, her breath shaky. "I found it in my closet," she said. "The last time I visited you. You must have left it behind." She placed it on the coffee table like it was sacred. And for me, it was. I read it. My heart stopped. I wasn't trying to pry, she rushed, but I recognized her handwriting. I was looking for something that made sense. Silence fell between us like a curtain, heavy, still. "I didn't know about Harold Sterling," she whispered, "or the money, or the trust, or any of it." I nodded once, slowly. "I didn't know either, not until I had nothing else to lose." Her voice broke. "Mom, why didn't you tell me? Why did you let me believe you were helpless?" I looked her in the eye, and for once, she didn't look away. "Because I was helpless. The night you closed the door on me, I didn't have a plan. I didn't have money. I didn't even have a place to cry where someone wouldn't knock and tell me to keep it down." Amanda winced. "I found the diary at my lowest point, when I was counting coins to eat dinner, when I hadn't spoken to anyone in a week. That diary, it didn't just tell me who I was. It reminded me that I mattered, that my mother didn't just love me. She fought for me, silently, without ever being able to show it. Amanda sat down, hands clenched in her lap. I don't know how I became the kind of daughter who could do what I did. I keep asking myself that, over and over. I walked to the window, stared out at the street below, the quiet hum of life passing by. You didn't become her all at once, I said. It was small choices, letting things slide, choosing peace over truth, believing love meant loyalty, even when it hurt. She stood and walked toward me. I've left him. The words hit the air like a bomb. He tried to go through my things again, my laptop, my bag. I told him no, that was it. He screamed, packed a bag, and left. Said he'd be back. I changed the locks the next day. I turned to her, stunned. I don't know who I am without him, she admitted, voice trembling. But I'd rather find out than keep disappearing. A silence passed between us, thick with everything we hadn't said. Then she looked down at the diary. You didn't deserve what I did, what we did. I can't fix that, but I want to try. I walked back to her slowly, sat down beside her. I used to dream about hearing those words, I said, but when you say them now, they don't fix the past. They rewrite it. She looked at me confused. I held her hand gently. You see me now. That changes everything. We sat there together for a long time. The kind of silence that doesn't hurt, but heals. The kind that comes after truth has finally had its say. Before Amanda left that night, she paused at the door. You didn't raise me to be weak, she said. I just forgot how strong you were. I smiled softly. No, I said. You didn't forget. You just stopped looking. And now she was seeing everything. Not just who I had become, but who I'd always been. When the email came in from Chad, I almost didn't open it. The subject line alone made my stomach churn. We need to talk. Now. I read it, slowly, carefully, his words sharp, frantic, and dripping with desperation. I know everything. About the building. About the inheritance. About your little secret with Sterling. You think you're clever? You think you can ruin my life and walk away smiling? Let me make something clear. If you don't undo this, I will go to the press. Your name, your mother's affair, everything. Let's see how your precious reputation holds up when everyone knows what kind of family you really come from. I stared at the screen in stunned silence. He had finally connected the dots. Somehow, through Amanda or his own digging, he'd discovered the truth. But I wasn't afraid, because I had planned for this moment since the day I bought the building. I forwarded the email to my attorney. By the next morning, Chad received a cease and desist letter. In it were records of every threatening message he had sent to the property office, the falsified documents he tried to submit under a fake law firm, and the tampered emails we had quietly traced back to his IP address. There were tenant complaints, maintenance sabotage logs, and even audio clips of his rants from public spaces around the building. We didn't need to press criminal charges. Just one defamation and harassment suit was enough. He panicked, and I knew it because Amanda called me 2 days later. He's gone, she said, her voice shaking. Packed up while I was at work. Left a note saying he was being hunted. Said you ruined his life. He ruined his own, I said quietly. Amanda was silent. Then, I'm sorry. Again, for ever thinking he deserved my silence. You were scared, I replied. I've been there. Fear makes you small, but you don't have to stay that way. It wasn't long before Chad tried to retaliate, posting vague rants on social media, implying corruption, betrayal. He never named names. He couldn't afford to. Not after the second letter from my attorney threatened legal action for every word he published. He went quiet after that. Publicly, at least. Privately, I knew he'd never forget the day he realized the woman he kicked out with 2 suitcases and a tired face now owned the roof over his head, the lease under his name, and the keys to every locked door he once slammed in mine. Amanda, on the other hand, was transforming. She moved out of the unit within a month, found a small studio near her job, started therapy, joined a community art class. She even painted something for me, an abstract of a phoenix in dark reds and golds. I hung it above my fireplace. We talked more often now. Not every day, but when we did, it was real, honest, no more pretending. The last piece of the puzzle came in an envelope. Another letter, this one from Mr. Goldstein. Congratulations, Margaret. The building has officially been transferred. The final tenants have signed new agreements. The lawsuit against Mr. Harmon has been resolved in your favor. You are now free to sell, hold, or restructure as you see fit. I folded the letter carefully, held it to my chest. This wasn't just about money, or property, or revenge. This was about truth, about reclaiming my name, my story, my strength. The next morning, I called a realtor. I was ready to close the last chapter and open the door to a life I no longer had to survive. I could finally live it, on my terms. I sold the building in late spring. The final paperwork was signed on a bright, cloudless Tuesday. No fanfare, no ceremony, just a quiet click of a pen, a firm handshake, and the weight of 3 years of grief, betrayal, and silence finally lifting off my shoulders. The money was wired to my account the next day, but I didn't celebrate. Instead, I wrote a check, a large one. Half of the proceeds went to a local shelter for women and children in crisis. The kind of place I wish I had known existed the night I stood on that curb with 2 suitcases and no one to call. I asked them to build a wing named after my mother, the Eleanor House. It was my way of honoring the woman who gave me strength in silence, who hid a lifetime of secrets so that I could one day discover the truth and become something more than what the world expected. The other half? I used it to buy a small house. It wasn't extravagant, just a charming little 2-bedroom on the same street where I grew up in Cedar Park. Oak trees out front, a porch swing, enough space for quiet, for healing, for growing tomatoes if I ever felt like trying. The day I moved in, Amanda helped carry boxes. She didn't say much, neither did I. But after we finished unpacking, she sat beside me on the porch swing, legs tucked under her, eyes scanning the street like she was trying to recognize the girl she used to be. "I remember riding my bike here," she said softly. "Before everything got complicated." I nodded. "You were always safe here," I told her. "I forgot how that felt," she whispered. "We didn't talk about Chad. We didn't need to. His chapter had closed without a dramatic ending, just silence. He disappeared into a new city, a new job, probably a new lie, but not before signing a non-disclosure agreement and quietly dropping his threats. The last thing he wanted was another legal battle, or worse, for the world to see the truth about him. He was a ghost now. Amanda stayed for dinner. We made grilled cheese sandwiches and tomato soup like we used to when she was little. She laughed when she burned one side. I laughed when she tried to blame the pan. It was the first real laughter we had shared in years. That night, after she left, I stood at the window, holding a cup of tea in both hands, watching the moonlight stretch across the front lawn. And for the first time in a long, long time, I said the words out loud. "I forgive you." Not to Amanda, to myself. Because that was the hardest part, not rising from the ashes, but learning that I was never the fire they tried to extinguish. I was the spark they underestimated. They taught me that silence was weakness, but I learned how to weaponize it. They tried to erase me, and I became someone they could never forget. I sat down on the couch, opened the diary one last time, and tucked a note inside for Amanda to find someday. You don't need their love to be worthy. You don't need their approval to be strong. You only need the truth, and to never, ever forget who you are. The clock ticked softly in the background. My tea grew cold in my hands, but my heart, it was finally warm. I didn't need to scream. I didn't need to win. I just needed to be who I was all along. And now, finally, I was home. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.